Yes.
today.
Yeah. Okay, let's start. Okay, hi everybody, welcome to our seminar. Our topic is going to be about going green. Alright, I'm done with that. Okay. Okay, before I start, I just want to introduce our thesis, and to do that I need to introduce a few key terms. And well, first of that is climate change, and I know we're all very aware of that, so just a short description. Climate change is like the long-term change in weather patterns and rise in average temperatures. So since the mid-1800s, humans have played a big role in the worsening effects of climate change, like rising sea levels, rising temperatures, loss of species biodiversity, and other things like that. Because of the worsening effects of climate change, people have begun to see the importance of taking care of the environment. And one of the movements that resulted from this initiative is the Going Green movement. The Going Green means practicing an environmental friendly and ecologically responsible lifestyle, and eventually it would lead all of us into sustainability. Okay, with this, there are several reasons why Going Green isn't 100% implemented yet, and one of those reasons is the lack of cooperation between the three pillars of society, so the government, the economy, and the people. With this, our group believes that a completely environmental friendly society is unachievable unless there's commitment, cooperation, and support from various global economic and social bodies. Okay. So this is our flow for today. I will start off with greenwashing, then Stan will elaborate on plastic use, and then Kamal with clean energy, Pearl with electric vehicles, Cedric with reforestation, then we'll go into a discussion at the end of it all. Okay, so I'll start on greenwashing, but first, what is greenwashing? According to Cambridge Dictionary, greenwashing is anything that makes people believe that a company is doing more to protect the environment than it really is. I think another important term to bring up is corporate social responsibility. So that's actually it's a management concept wherein companies will integrate social and environmental concepts into their business operations. So in relation to that, greenwashing will actually be like when companies treat sustainability and environmental stuff as a marketing stunt instead to appeal to consumers who are trying to buy eco-friendly products. So greenwashing isn't a small issue actually. 3 out of 5 executives say that their companies engage in greenwashing, with 35% admitting they treat sustainability as a PR stunt. So what does this actually mean for us as consumers, and what does this mean for the Going Green movement? So this statistic, along with many other similar ones, it just only goes to show that greenwashing is one of the major setbacks to the Going Green movement. Because of the lack of cooperation from the economic sector, greenwashing emerges and consumers aren't able to purchase sustainably even if they wanted to. Now what? So because of this problem, my research focuses on greenwashing research and how to push companies to more sustainable trajectories. And what these 3 articles that I've researched all have in common is they agree on the importance of the cooperation between companies, consumers, and regulators into achieving a sustainable future. For the first source I researched concluded that a mix of mandatory and voluntary approaches to CSR is important in order to reduce greenwashing. They believe that a fully voluntary or a fully mandatory approach would actually diffuse greenwashing even more. One of the cons of a fully voluntary, for example, is that it relies solely on the companies to take their own initiative when it comes to CSR. So that means that it may not be the #1 priority for many companies, which would either lead to them not doing anything sustainable at all or to do even more greenwashing. For a fully mandatory approach, it would be hard to set a regulation and a baseline for every single type of company in different types of countries. So it would also be hard to incentivize companies to do above the regulation of a baseline. So they would do the bare minimum and nothing else, which is actually not good for sustainability because it doesn't really give them much of an incentive to do more. And so the solution provided by this research is to have a mix of mandatory regulation and voluntary initiatives. So the paper suggests that these combinations would actually provide a baseline for environmental performance while giving companies their own opportunities to differentiate themselves through their own sustainable strategies. So the second source focuses on changing the perspectives and trying to green the greenwashers. So it discusses ways on how to push companies towards sustainability. The paper proposes a framework based on 3 key elements, which is 1, identifying greenwashing behavior, The second is trying to find the motivations behind why they do the greenwashing, and the last one is to find interventions to push them to sustainability. So these interventions are raising consumer awareness, holding companies accountable, inspiring change within organizations, and using greenwashing as a leverage to enforce more laws that will decrease greenwashing. Okay. Overall, the main message of the paper is that regulatory measures plus targeted intervention and stakeholder engagement is essential to reducing greenwashing. Okay. So this last source examines the effectiveness of government intervention in reducing greenwashing. So they use like models and simulations, and they eventually reveals that government regulations are very important in reducing greenwashing, and they do have a positive impact on that, but only if they're implemented properly, and they have to take into account like lower income, higher income, middle income types of companies. Also have to have different types of like a regulatory pressure for each types of these companies. So overall, the paper highlights like the potential of government regulation in reducing the amount of greenwashing, but only if there's a tailored approach in the implication of this pressure. So, well, again, just to reiterate, all these three sources do line up with their thesis, and they do agree that unless there is like intervention within the government and cooperation from the economic sector, then that's the only way that greenwashing will be able to be like reduced and eradicated, and Going Green movement can move forward.
Hey, hi guys, so I'm Stan, and I'm going to be talking about plastic use. To start off, I want to ask you guys a question. How much total plastic waste is generated daily by households in Hong Kong? Like, you can just shout out an answer. Unfortunately, there are no prizes, but you can just shout out an answer. Any number.
110?
100, sorry? Tons. Okay, another answer. Anyone else? 200 tons. What else? Anyone else?
Per household, maybe?
Sorry?
Per one household.
Per one household.
1 kg.
Oh, sorry. Total household.
Oh, total. Oh, I don't know, but my guess would be like 500 grams to 1 kilogram a day. It's quite a lot that we use.
1,300.
So, Aaron is correct. It's 1,318 tons of plastic waste generated daily by households in Hong Kong. So this is equal to 6.59 million apples and 2,028 horses. This is such a large number that landfills in Hong Kong are slowly pushing their limits, and recycling of plastic is still a far cry from what it needs to be. With that, I want to ask, what is plastic? Why is it ending up in our landfills? So plastic is a material that's comprised of synthetic organic polymers, and a large portion of the plastic that we use today is actually petrol-based, so it's made of petroleum or fossil fuels. This is also an area of concern because initially it was thought to be harmless. It was made with the intention of being durable and reusable. However, due to considered hazardous due to its lack of biodegradability and presence of toxic components. In this table, it's very technical. One page back, please. It's very technical, but it summarizes the 7 major types of plastic, a lot of which contain harmful chemicals. So there's just the 7 types of plastic: PET, HDPE, V, LDPE, PPPS, and others. So these are too technical, I'm not going to get into them. But to sum up, a lot of them do contain harmful chemicals that are, some of which are carcinogenic, which can cause cancer, or other types of diseases. With this in mind, and all of the characteristics of plastic in mind, it leads to a negative view of plastic, and thus leading to the plastic problem. Researchers point out that plastic is a major environmental burden, and that plastic bags constitute an environmental hazard. So, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, it increased the amount of global infectious waste and disposable waste, such as from takeaway or from single-use plastic bags, by a lot. For example, global infectious medical waste increased 6-fold, from 40 tons per day to 240 tons per day worldwide. So with that, I want to present 2 types of solutions to the plastic problem. The first is effective waste management, and the second is influencing consumer behaviors. For each of the sub-solutions in each type, the government is always a stakeholder, as it's either a facilitator, so maybe it would have some sort of mandate or legislation for corporations and society to follow, or it would be the main stakeholder where it would maybe engage with other governments or engage with like the global industry to reduce plastic as a whole. So to start with effective waste management protocols, we have Universal Action Plan. So the Universal Action Plan has the main stakeholders as the government and the secondary stakeholders as the citizens. This action plan calls for standardization among countries, among the governments of countries all over the world, so that they can achieve similar results relative to their economic capability. So as Leanne said, you can't really have a one-size-fits-all solution for the plastic problem because each country is going through their own economic struggles or economic discrepancies. So it's important to have some sort of standardization, but to a point where you can still achieve results relative to whatever circumstances each country or government is facing. Then we have the circular economy. The main stakeholders are the government and corporations, while the secondary stakeholders are citizens. This seeks to close the loop in the waste cycle, wherein you can repurpose waste back into the production process. So let's say a plastic bottle that you throw away today might be able to be taken out of the landfill and be repurposed into another kind of product or another kind of service. That way we are reducing waste and we are also repurposing plastic waste to bring it back as a raw material instead for a different kind of product. For influencing consumer behaviors, we have voice prompt intervention and social pressure. For voice prompt intervention, the main stakeholders are corporations and consumers, while the secondary stakeholders are government. The government would mainly just be a facilitator, as they can probably set up a mandate or legislation for corporations and consumers to follow through with. So voice prompt intervention aims to give customers a choice by prompting or nudging them by probably asking them a question. The study conducted by Erkin and Vaisel shows that consumers who declined free plastic bags increased from 22% to 73% when they were asked, would you like a plastic bag, when grocery shopping. So as we can see here, merely asking a customer can really change how much plastic is being used. Social pressure acts in a similar way to voice prompt intervention, but social pressure focuses more on social norms, so like how you think society would feel if you act a certain way. So the main stakeholders are corporations and consumers, while the secondary stakeholder is the government. Social norms are used in a way such that it can increase one's intention of using cloth bags over plastic bags. As seen in this statistic here, a 1 unit increase of social pressure increased one's intention to use cloth bags instead of plastic bags by 0.62 units. This factor of social norms was much more influential compared to other factors like environmental awareness or banning plastic bags in general, as seen in this paper. So all of these solutions beg the question of feasibility, which is more feasible and what can we implement now. So for example, effective waste management protocols may take longer to implement because it involves larger bodies of people to cooperate, such as governments of the global industry to come to a compromise, and that's going to be quite difficult. However, I believe that the effective waste management protocols might be the most effective in the long term because it involves the collaboration of the entire global industry. Influencing consumer behaviors may be more doable for the moment and for the time being, as governments are merely facilitating how corporations influence their consumers. As I said a while ago, governments could set up a mandate or legislation that corporations and consumers can just follow through with within their respective country. So to sum it all up, it really just comes down to the three R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle. So Erkin and Vaisel's study of influencing consumer behaviors focuses on reducing plastic use and demand at its source, the consumers themselves. When you reduce demand for plastic in consumers, it will eventually go back to production and be like, hey, not a lot of people are using plastic. Maybe we should reduce the amount of plastic we're making in order to make up for all of our losses. Then Vanapali et al., or the effective waste management protocols, focus on reusing and recycling through a universal action plan and circular economy. So as shown through my solutions, it involves the cooperation of the government, corporations, and society in order to achieve in order to reduce plastic waste as a whole.
Okay. Hi guys, I'm Kamal. So today I'll be approaching the shift to green society from the aspect of renewable energy. So 97% of scientists believe that climate change is a real issue and that it is an issue we need to face today. It is estimated that the effects of climate change can kill approximately 150 million people this century, and all these premature deaths can be avoided by maintaining the rise of global temperatures within 1.5 degrees. The window of opportunity left to make this change, however, is very narrow. The greenhouse emissions would need to be reduced by the amounts shown here to limit global warming within 1.5 degrees with no or limited overshoot. This issue has stimulated everyone to demand governments and corporations for a full switch to renewables. But are these expectations realistic, and should they even be attempted at all? Okay, so I'm going to give a little bit of background on renewables. Renewable energy is derived from natural processes that replenish constantly on a human timescale. They derive directly from the sun or from heat energy deep within the earth. They have the benefits listed here, obviously environmental benefits and the fact that they never run out. They also have helped local jobs and economy as they don't require expensive energy imports, and they provide energy security because by lowering dependence on foreign countries. So to analyze the viability of different energy sources, we have 4 imperatives: power density, energy density, cost, and scalability. And for the special case of renewables, we add a 5th one, which is reliability. So let's start by addressing the elephant in the room, which is reliability. The graph here shows the capacity factors for various different energy sources. Capacity factor basically represents the percentage of time in which an energy source is providing optimal output. The major problem with solar and wind is that their capacity factor is very low, in some places only 10% of the time, and even the most efficient wind and solar farms only provide optimum, sufficient energy 30% of the time. So in order to stand alone, renewable energy must provide power independent of conventional energy sources. So they would need some energy storage to meet the demand when the sun and wind are unavailable. However, the largest battery currently available in the world can only power 30,000 homes for 1 hour. And assuming we did have immensely large batteries dotted all across the country, to charge them up and power cities at the same time would require immense space. Considering that renewable energy facilities require 10 times the space of conventional facilities, it begs the question of, will we have enough space? For example, powering all of the UK with renewable energies would require 25% of its surface area to be cleared of all vegetation and wildlife to be turned into solar and wind farms. For example, solar cells enough to power New York City would require an area the size of Connecticut. And if we used wind farms instead, the size would be 5 times larger. And the side effects of renewables don't end there. Windmills kill hundreds of thousands of large endangered bird species and millions of bats per year. Solar farms, for example, set birds on fire mid-air, causing them to plummet to their deaths. Very nice. And also, new and popular cheaply made solar panels break down in as little as 5 years, after which the only way to deal with them would be to ship them off to poor countries in Africa or South America to be decommissioned by locals, where the chemicals that they release will harm the local soil, water, and civilians. So because of the lack of insufficient batteries, So matching power supply to the power demand is called load balancing. The power demand side can be easily anticipated from past data, but unpredictability from major sources on the supply side make load balancing virtually impossible. So in order to back renewables up while they're not producing, we would need some conventional sources to produce energy when the wind and sun aren't there. These would require energy sources that can be activated really fast. But the disadvantage of this is that these dispatchable energy sources are expensive and highly inefficient, which release large amounts of CO2. So actually, renewable energy systems don't decrease CO2 emissions as much as they are said to. Project lives of renewable energy facilities are also much lower than conventional ones, which is why they would be need to be replaced more often. They also need to be far from urban areas, which increase the cost of infrastructure and high voltage grid lines. We would also need to educate workers who will eventually lose their jobs due to the disappearance of their industry. For example, recently Germany has agreed to invest $40 billion on educating local coal cities so that they don't lose their sense of community and jobs. So due to these reasons, 70% of countries consider cost to be the primary limitation on the renewable renewables. One aspect in which renewables do have an advantage, however, is safety. As you can see from this graph, the worker, like accident-related deaths and gas emissions for renewables are much lower than fossil fuels. But what you may find surprising is nuclear is at the bottom of the list for both workplace deaths and emissions. And that is including events like Fukushima, Chernobyl, and 3 Mile Island. Nuclear energy has a really bad public image due to its association with warheads and Chernobyl, but statistically it is the safest and most reliable energy source that we have today. While they may be expensive to build, their long operating lifetime and cheap fuel cause them to be relatively cheap in the long run. They also require 17 times less material than solar panels, and the nuclear waste can be recycled to be reused again, giving us thousands of years worth of fuel. Nuclear waste, in fact, is the only waste from electricity that can be safely contained and internalized without harming the environment. So is all this to say that the idea of renewables playing a major factor in society should be scrapped? Absolutely not. The benefits of renewables we mentioned earlier still exist. The governmental support and investments are going a long way in making a difference. As you can see in this graph, or you can't see.
Sir?
Okay.
Okay.
Since 2009, the massive amounts of investments have made renewables much cheaper and more viable for the economy. So a potential solution to the load balancing problem is what we call the Internet of Things, which is a complex network of all physical things that exchange data with each other through Wi-Fi to create the most efficient grid possible. This sort of project would require immense investment and long time of development, but it would eliminate the need for dispatchable backups, which would actually make renewables zero net carbon emissions. So governments use a lot of incentives to make renewable energy investments more appealing to investors, such as feed-in tariffs, green certificates, renewable portfolio standards, and tax incentives. I won't go deep into each of them since, just for the sake of time, but basically all of these guarantee investors some return on their investments of renewables, or in some way reduce the amount of investments that they require. Developing countries face especially many challenges in renewable development. To help overcome these issues, many international agreements have been set up to do all of these things, as you can see. So, in conclusion, it is evident that renewable energies, perhaps even more than other problems, require commitment from all pillars of society, governments, firms, and citizens on the path to an environmentally friendly society.
Okay, hi guys, I'm Pearl and I'm gonna talk about electric vehicles. So imagine a world where cars are not only affordable and also efficient, but it's also environmentally friendly. Well, it's not a distant dream anymore, as electric cars are here to solve the problem. So Tesla and Nissan might be some electric car brands that you have heard of. But how much do you really know about electric cars and what are its problems and its drawbacks? So I'm going to cover some of this in my presentation today. So first of all, let's look at the advantages of electric cars. So let's look at the benefits. So firstly, to the environment, as all of you might have known, electric cars have zero emissions, which means that they are much better for the environment than gasoline-powered cars. This includes a decrease in greenhouse gas emissions and a decrease in carbon footprint, which will contribute less greenhouse gas. And secondly, electric cars have lower noise. So this can reduce noise pollution and give a more smooth and quiet driving experience. Also, in terms of performance, electric cars have better acceleration and torque than traditional cars, and this gives a better driving experience. And lastly, in terms of energy dependence, electric cars help reduce dependence on foreign oil, as they can be powered from renewable energy such as hydropower, solar panels, and nuclear power. But every solution has its drawbacks, and are electric cars really as environmentally friendly as we think they are? The answer is no, and we're going to look at it today. So there are 4 main environmental impacts of electric cars. Firstly, the extraction of raw materials like cobalt and nickel. So the mining of these resources will actually cause contamination of water and contamination of land because of the heavy metal and other toxic substances which may pollute the aquatic life and also to the human. Soil quality will also worsen as the soil may be disrupted and the ability for soil to absorb and retain water decreases. This means that the soil will become less fertile and it becomes unable to grow fertile plants. The disposal of electric car vehicles, the disposal of electric batteries will also cause land pollution as there are a lot of toxic gas like lithium and also substances like lead which will pollute and contaminate underground water. For the transportation of materials, so we all know that electric cars is actually a relatively small industry, so it could only be produced in like more advanced countries like Japan or the US. But then raw materials such as cobalt and nickel actually come from countries like Chile or Argentina. So there's actually a lot of transportation required for these materials, and this include aviation or boat shipping. So all of these processes contribute a lot to greenhouse gas and energy waste. And lastly, for the manufacturing of EV batteries, we actually acquire a lot of energy as well, and that will lead to greenhouse gas emission. So those were the environmental impacts on electric vehicles. And there is one potential problem for the large-scale implementation of electric vehicles, and that is the problem of potential strain on electricity grid. So this is because the charging of electric cars require a significant amount of energy, and if too many electric cars are to charge together, then this may lead to a power outage and overwhelm the grid. So in easier words, when the demand for electricity is larger than the available capacity, this will have a power outage. So to avoid the potential strain on electricity grid, it is important for governments and utilities to invest in infrastructures and alleviate this problem. And this includes implementing more smart charging technology or some grid modernization. And this also proves our thesis where a collaborative effort is needed to achieve a green society. So, a quick question. How many % of people in the world how many % of people do you think in Hong Kong own electric cars?
2%.
2%. Any other guesses?
1%.
1%.
0.1.
It's a bit higher.
0.5.
Higher.
3%.
Yeah, you're close. It's actually, so as of February 2023, it's actually 5.5%, and that is 1 in 20 people. So on a ratio, 1 person in our class actually have an electric car, and you might say that the stats are actually not that bad, but then I would say it's only in Hong Kong because globally the stats are actually pretty bad. So let's see. So globally, you can see the orange bar. Actually, the share for electric vehicles only account for 0.9%, and that is really low because many undeveloped countries or like developing countries, they don't have the technology and they could not afford like charging stations and other facilities required for electric vehicles. So let's look at the intention for people to buy electric cars. So, like many of you, this report was taken from Australia in 2020, and around like everyone in the report have actually heard of electric cars, but then only 45% of people are aware and have the intention to purchase an electric cars, and only 2% of people currently own an electric cars. So this leads to a question: what are the factors that lead to people purchasing electric cars? And it's actually not something that's really sophisticated that you and I can't think of. It's actually really the simple factors, which is the price and the time. So statistics show that a decrease in price of EV would actually lead to an increase in sale, and also if the charging time of electric vehicles decreases, then the sales will also be increased in a significant amount. So this leads to the last part of my presentation, and that is a modeling structure which is used to study the planning and the planning of electric vehicles. Because as we see, if we have a good planning with lower charges and faster and more efficient charging system, the purchase of electric vehicles will actually increase. So in the first step of this 3 modeling approach, it's the demand-based model. So in this stage, the authors basically collected data on the various factors that influence electric vehicle adoptions, such as the demographics, the income, the travel patterns,